take 1 more minute. Are you doing it online?
Just save it. Don't spend it.
You can send it, yeah. Or you can give it this way. Alright guys, please pass those. Make sure, of course, you have both sides filled out. There's no two sides. It's just gonna hurt. Just gonna hurt that. Side?
I think it's cruising.
Thank you. All right, anybody else? Guys, again, the idea here is not that you know about this. The idea is that I know what you know. And believe me, if you fill out this little quiz at the end of your program, you will answer it very differently. I guarantee you that. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we will talk about a lot of those answers. First of all, a lot of those don't have correct, incorrect. There are different ways to think about those answers. So we'll talk about those answers. Some of them actually already today, and some of them later in the course. Some of them in this course, some of them later today. Again, just thinking about those. But more, it's for me to know what you already know. So let me start with, I know you're here to learn about real estate, except I cannot teach you real estate in a vacuum. Okay, the reason I can't teach you real estate in a vacuum is the fact that when there is money out there waiting to be invested, people don't have this set of mind that says, I have money, I'm going to invest in real estate. Now, some people, that's how they do, but that's the small money. That is the unsophisticated investors. That's how they think. Most sophisticated large investors say, okay, we have money, we want to invest. And then money will chase the best risk-reward opportunities. Sometimes they are in real estate, and sometimes they're in other asset classes. So the idea that money flows into different asset classes make you as a real estate professional have to be aware at least a little bit of what's going on around you. And if you don't know anything about what returns investor can expect, for example, in the stock market, and what kind of returns you should be expecting in the bond market, and what opportunities are there, at least in the 2 or 3 different other major markets, then you can be very surprised of why people don't buy from you or do buy a lot, or what should be a good deal for them and whatnot. So you cannot just look at real estate in a vacuum. You need to look at other assets as well. So I'm going to start to basically give you a little bit of background of other things aside from real estate, and then we're going to ease into real estate maybe later today, most likely next week. So let me start with this particular PowerPoint presentation called Performance Stocks, Bond, Gold, Inflation. Guys, if you're taking the quizzes, please do not send it to me right now. Send it to me later, because I rather receive those emails not while I'm in class. If you can, either after class or tomorrow, that would be better for me. Okay. This particular graph right here is an illustration of what happened if you were to take $100 in 1928 and invest this $100 in different asset classes. Okay? In this case, one asset class is T-bonds. Okay, those basically long-term debts. Okay, basically lending your money to either the government or to corporations for a long period of time, usually classified as at least 10 years, longer than 10 years. T-bills, those are, again, you lending your money to some, usually we're talking about treasury notes, lending to the government, but it doesn't have to be the government. When you lend for a shorter period of time, so a year, 90 days, 2 years, usually up to 10 years, but mostly within a year, 2 or 3 years. The T-bills. Stocks, so basically ownership in some companies. So you have equity in some companies, you're becoming a part owner. And gold by itself is not an asset class. It is part of commodities. So commodities it can be classified as anything where you have 2 units of the same item that basically look identical or near identical. So when you take 1 ounce of gold, another ounce of gold, they are interchangeable. Or 1 ounce of silver, another ounce of silver. Some of the commodities are not identical, so maybe 1 pound of beef will not look like exactly like the other pound of beef, but basically they trade as they are, right? People buy beef as a commodity. The same thing with wheat or oil, again, maybe the viscosity or the composition will be slightly different, but basically we buy barrels of oil as commodity. Gold is one commodity that I'm using here as an example. So, which one did better? By like a tiny bit? Okay, but just like a tiny bit. Okay, if you invested in stocks, you took your $100, this $100 in nominal terms, we don't adjust for inflation yet, is basically becoming $300,000. Okay, so what is that? 10 times will be 1,000. 100 times will be 10,000. 1,000 times will be 100,000. So 3 times that, so basically 3,000 times. Okay, that's many, many, many percentages. On the other hand, if you were investing in something like gold or treasury bills, treasury bonds, you basically somewhere here. So we need a magnifying glass to see where exactly it is. So I provide that to you. This is a magnifying glass. Okay? You basically took this $100 and it become anywhere from 2,000 all the way to maybe 6,000 or 7,000, depends on which we're looking at. But again, this is over a very long period of time. The comparison is not even there. You can't compare in terms of magnitude. I mean, they're not even close. Equities are so much ahead of gold, commodities, or bonds that it's not even a fair comparison. Go ahead.
This hasn't been adjusted for inflation.
That has not been adjusted for inflation. This is adjusted for inflation. So if you are adjusting for the power of purchasing, okay, so $100 back then, adjust for inflation, basically invested in stocks, the story is the same, just the numbers are different. Okay, so just inflation with stocks is going to be somewhere around 22, 23,000, and then the other ones are somewhere here. And when I'm talking about somewhere here, basically from 100, one of them become 150, and the other ones become somewhere 400 to 500. Again, if you want to find a way to get rich, waiting 9 years to go from 100 to 150 is probably not your strategy. Or even going from 100 to 500 to 400. That's not a way to get rich. Now, as I'm watching the emails, okay, just want to make sure there are no questions. Now, if you know something about finance, if you have any kind of exposure to finance, this is not new to you. Maybe the numbers are a little bit new, but the story is not new to you. People that know something about finance know that stocks would outperform or outperform in the past commodities, treasury bills, treasury bonds. What's more important than what actually happened is why it happened. And the reason this is so much more important is because, and you see that over and over and over again, a lot of people know facts because you can read something in Wikipedia. The return on stocks was X, or the return on gold was Y, whatever it is. And people know things because they read about it or they heard about it. But if you don't understand why those things happened, you have no ability to predict whether they're going to continue to happen in that way in the future or not. Now, I'm not suggesting that you know the future, but if you know why stocks outperform gold, for example, you'd have a much better idea whether they will continue to do that in the next 80 years, or whether it's like, well, it happened in the past, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I'm telling you, there's a way to know whether it's going to continue to happen in the future. I don't know the exact gap, but I do know that those trends will happen, will continue to happen in the future for reasons that we're going to discuss right now. So we want to understand why those things happen, because just like in this case, in all other cases, if you understand the reason behind it, you'll be able to make more intelligent assumptions about what's going to happen in the future. And that's really what matters. We don't care about people that got rich in the past, right? It's wonderful. Oh, those people made a lot of money. Great. Well, what am I doing now from this point into the future? So let's talk about for a little bit, why do you think, let's start with that, stocks outperform commodities, for example, gold, in the past? And why I think, and you should think, I believe too, stocks will continue and outperform gold in the future. Your name?
Arturo.
Arturo.
There's just more growth opportunities.
More growth opportunities. What do you mean by that?
I think, the technology, the creation of new things, basically, I don't know, let's use for an example, like a Facebook or something for, like any kind of electricity invention that there was. It revolutionizes the world. So investing in that, I think, is going to have more of a dramatic effect than investing in something that more or less.
You say a lot of very, very good things. Yes, I agree with that. I'm gonna rephrase it in a second, but a lot of what you're saying is very much correct. Anything else?
I'm trying to think in the way of gold. It's not used to back, for example, currencies in the past, so it's something to be conservative versus what he said. Supposed to
So
be.
basically, it was designed to stay stable. Is that what you're saying?
The way it's used.
Okay. Let me respond to that in a second too.
Maybe commodities are more widely used and more easy to determine a long-term value and projected return on that investment versus a stock has a little bit more volatility and more risk. There's more reward.
Okay, so let me respond. All those things are good. Let me respond to that because I think we kind of summarize everything that I want to say. So I'm going to start with Ross. Usually some of the answer that I get from Ross is the answer I'm getting. The very first people raise their hand and say, well, because stocks are riskier. And my response to that is that risk does not cause. Risk correlates with return. Those are very different things. Think about it. There's a lot of risky things that we can do that would give us no return whatsoever. Okay? So if I choose to I like riding my bicycle, and if I choose to not to get from A to B, but just to exercise, okay? If I choose to ride my bicycle at 1 o'clock at night in South Beach against traffic, okay, I can do that. Would you agree that it's a very risky behavior?
Yes.
Okay? What would be the reward for that? Almost nothing. Unless you count thrill as a reward, there's no reward there. Okay? Just pure stupidity. It does not make sense. You have a lot of risk, you're not going to get a reward. Okay? So, doing things that are risky by themselves does not mean you're going to get a reward. It just so happens that in finance, there's high correlation between the two because risky things are priced lower that then allow you to receive higher rewards. So it's not the reason there's a correlation. But it is true that there is usually slightly more volatility in stocks than there are in commodities. Not all of them, but on average is correct. The reason is more of what Arturo was saying there before. If you think about it, any commodity, if I'm taking an ounce of gold in 1928, I put it in the safe, and then I'm opening the safe in 2015, what do you think I'm going to find in my safe?
Same.
And if nobody stole it in those 80 years, whatever in between, or 9 years in between, I'm going to have 1 ounce of gold. It didn't produce anything. Okay? Now, also if you think about commodities, they have very finite value in terms of what you can do with them. So I know people talk about investment in gold, which doesn't make to me any sense because, well, first of all, the usage of what you can do with gold is very limited. Yeah, we can make rings, watches, but basically we'll be fine tomorrow if all the gold in the world disappear. We'll be just fine. There's worse thing can happen than we're not going to have gold in the world, right? Okay? And even things that we do need more. Okay, you don't have wheat. Well, there's other things you can substitute them. But the idea here is that it's very finite. Okay, if you have a gallon of gasoline, you can use it to do a particular amount of work, whether it's to move your vehicle, your airplane, whatever it is, from one place, and that's it. It's done. It's over. Okay? That is very different than when you invest in something like a company. So, for example, the difference between an ounce of gold versus investing, for example, in a gold mining company, or the difference between a barrel of oil versus investing in a oil company, oil producing company, it's the fact that, again, you have a finite, which is the commodity, a barrel of oil or an ounce of gold, versus a company where you take capital, money, machinery, technology, people and talent work together in order to create infinite or potentially infinite number of barrels of oil. If we're sitting together and we have enough money and talent and we find, okay, we're going to put this money and we're going to buy this machinery and we're going to hire this engineer and we're going to hire this person and tell us where the oil is, we can basically from nothing, well, all these things are something, basically create a company that will produce thousands or millions of barrels of oil every day. Okay, and the growth there is basically unlimited. It's not capped by 1 ounce. It will always be 1 ounce. Okay, so the fact that there's some growth opportunities there versus a finite value for something, it's basically what will continue to generate that dispersion. Commodities are more of a value protection. Okay, if something will come, one second, if one commodity will become very, very expensive, we're just going to stop consuming it. So if an ounce of gold is $1,300, what if it will be 100 times that? It will be $130,000 for an ounce of gold. Then I say, you know what, I like my gold ring or my gold watch, but you know what, I have better things to do with that, and people are going to stop purchasing those things. And if the price of any other commodity like gasoline or wheat, whatever it is, will be extremely expensive, you just use something else instead. Okay? You can always substitute those things with something similar, and the value of them is finite.
On things that are going to be scarce in the future, like such as water, for example, I know people are...
Well, again, water is a...
Really some.
Well, water, the problem in the world is not with lack of water. The problem in the world is the lack of clean water. So the problem there is not so much in the commodity, is how you have access to that commodity. Okay? I mean, water is all around us, right? We have in Miami way too much water, right? I mean, there's water here, not here, there, that we really try to make sure that it's not going too high, right? We know we have those issues. The problem is not that we don't have enough water. The problem is we have insufficient clean water arriving in some places where it doesn't. So that's not so much of a commodity story. It's a different story. Okay? So basically, growth opportunities versus, what is that?
That happened on Monday.
It'll go away in like 5 minutes or less.
Okay. So that is the difference basically between commodities and stocks. And if you think about specifically about gold, because guys, I meet those people all the time. When they hear that I'm a finance professor, they always want to tell me about investment and, oh, I did this, what is your opinion? And my wife always kicks me under the table. It's like, Ellie, you can be a professor in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, you're not a professor. Don't tell people what they should not do. They don't want to hear you. They just want to hear themselves speak, so let them. So I'm usually pretty good about it. Let them speak, that's fine. But when people tell me about I'm investing in gold, or you see all those commercials like invest in gold, it doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense. They pick this one particular period when there is this big jump in oil. Like they would tell you, hey, between 1970 and 1985, gold went up 200%, or whatever it is. Well, it did, or 600%. Well, it did, but there's a story behind it who I'm not going to spend my time telling you right now. But so what? Long term, yes, you can be lucky and maybe own gold in that time. It doesn't mean it's a good investment. It may be that it was a good bet and you were lucky, but there's no way for you to predict this spike in gold. Over time, it is a terrible investment. It doesn't create any value. If you think about what really we do with gold, you dig it from the ground. You spend a lot of money digging from the ground, right? Finding it, digging from the ground, and then you spend a lot of money to buy and build vaults under the ground, and then you put it back underground. Okay, that's basically what we do. We're spending a lot of money to take it out of the ground, package it, and put it somewhere else underground, and we spend so much money for doing that, and then it's like, why do we do that? Because some people think that it will back. It doesn't make any sense. So that's my 2 cents on gold specifically, but the general is the commodity versus equities is just not a fair comparison even, and I want you to understand why.
I don't want to keep dwelling on this, but is that the gold standard which caused the spike?
Yeah, some of that is basically releasing the independence from gold standards, and all of a sudden there's a lot of betting on that, and then it went back to wherever it was. Okay, so there's no really value. There's no reason, the gold doesn't become any shinier or 5 times shinier during this time period. It's the same freaking ounce of gold,
yeah.
right? It's the same thing. So there's no reason for it to be sold for 5 times the price.
So the short answer for that question would be, can you just make a concession?
No value creation in terms of commodities. It will always stay the same unit that it is.
Okay.
Versus introduce value creation with companies. Those companies will take whatever it is we have, okay? Capital, technology, knowledge, ambition, people, all that together into creating something. Okay? I gave the example of creating or building a gold mining or an oil production company, but it can be the same thing with creating Facebook, right? You're creating from nothing. What Facebook came out of nothing. Well, basically 2 people with an idea came and say, okay, let's do this and that, and all of a sudden it has tremendous value. Okay, so you create something, and the limit of how valuable it is, there's no limit. It can be extremely valuable if people find a value for that. What about the other comparison? The difference between bonds and stocks. How do I know that over the next 100 years, stocks will continue and outperform bonds by a pretty big margin in the future? I know that. Okay, there's very few things you can say about it with no certainty, but it's pretty close. Somebody else, I'm sure. Yes?
Well, because, bonds are tied much more to the government, obviously. But
Some of them are corporate, but
yeah, but most of them, so it's going to go, the fluctuations are going to go with the government, whereas stocks not necessarily, so you're going to have less opportunity.
and who said, I hear what you say, who said that the government is not as good as...
Well, if the government has a big problem, then you're going to have a big problem.
Yeah, but companies can have big problems too, right? I see what you're saying. I'm, of course, try to challenge because that's my job here, if you haven't realized that. But yeah, companies can have a problem too. So the fact that it's tied to government versus companies is not necessarily their issue, especially that we talk about bonds. Some of them are corporate bonds. So some of them are tied to companies. Do you have a different answer? Yeah.
Maybe because they tend to be tied to interest rates.
Okay, so what about that?
Cycles. If we continue to have, let's say, a period of flat interest rates, it will tend to stay flat. Whereas stocks, as we look in history, they tend to go up.
Okay, so again, challenging you in that. Think about it. Yes, bonds, especially if you hold them until maturity, you're going to get a flat interest rate in most cases. There are different kind of bonds. You learn about it in corporate finance class. But basically, you're going to get a constant interest rate. Let's say that interest rate, let's say it's 5%. Okay? Even if it's always 5%, your investment grows. Because it's $100, and then it's 105, then it's 110 plus something, and then it's 115 or 16, and then 100. So your investment grows. So just because it's a flat interest rate, always 5%, doesn't mean that your investment stays flat. Your investment grow at that rate. So it doesn't really have to do with the flatness of the interest rate. I'll give one more and then I'll tell you what I think.
Because the return is a flat return.
Okay.
Versus a stock that can have growth or a growing return.
Okay, so again, in case of the example I just gave you, the return is 5, and in stocks you say it's variable. It can be different than 5.
Well, it grows. It can grow more than the bond if you're gonna.
How do you know it's going to be higher than 5 though?
You don't, but it will grow with the economy while you're stuck with whatever interest rate you have.
Okay. There's some truth to that. Let me maybe rephrase it. So here's the way it works. Bonds are the fuel for stocks. Bonds is what drives stocks. Here's the way the investment world works. If I'm a company, talk about a company, but it can be the government. If I'm a company and I want to invest in, I don't know, in this chair, okay? I have a company that I'm going to produce those genius chairs, and that is my new idea, okay? Now, I don't have the money, or have on some money, so if I don't have the money, I'm going to go and borrow that money. And I'm going to go to the public and borrow the money from them. If I'm a publicly traded company, that is a bond. And I tell the public, look, according to the interest rate today, I will pay you 5% a year in order to, because you give me the money, I'm going to take this money, invest, and build those chairs. Now, I, in my right mind, would never offer that deal unless I think I can make more than 5% on that investment in chairs. Okay? I would never offer somebody 5 if I think that I can take their money and then invest it in something else and make 3. Okay? Nobody in their right mind will do that. You only would borrow money at 5 if you think you can then go and invest it and get more than 5. 7, 10, 15, whatever this number, substantially or at least noticeably higher than 5%. Now, it doesn't mean that you're always going to do whatever you think you're going to do. So you borrow at 5 and you think you're going to make 10 and then it's a failure. You actually made only 5 or you make 3 or you lost money. It's possible. But on average, but also can go the other around. You thought you're going to make 10. It was really a big success. You make 20 or 30%. On average, those companies live up to expectations. Because those that don't live up to expectations, they run out of the sample. They basically go bankrupt. And they learn from their mistakes. So, we are too optimistic, so now we're going to... And the idea here is that they're always going to borrow at some rate and then invest. And on average, they're going to make higher returns. And if I'm sitting in my office and I want to invest in this and the return on this is, let's say, 10%, but the rate in the market is 8, and I'm kind of thinking, well, I can borrow at 8 and make 10. It's not big enough for me. The decision I'm going to make is that I'm just not going to invest in this. I'm not going to borrow, and I'm not going to invest. And a lot of people are going to come and do the same thing as me, and then nobody want to borrow money. The interest rate will go down. It will go down from 8, let's say, to 6, and then I'm going to go to the market and say, okay, now it makes sense to me. I'll borrow for 6, go invest. I'm going to make 10. On average, those people who do that will earn 10. So you're always going to have this margin that you're going to get some return on bonds, and then on top of that, it will be the return that you're going to get on the investment in the companies. The same thing go again to real estate. When you're buying an income-producing property, you buy this apartment building, you would never go to the bank and borrow money at 4% if you think you're going to earn 3% on the investment. The only reason you go to the bank and borrow at 4% is because you think that with the rent and appreciation and all that, you're going to make more than 4%. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. On average, the works that you do. If not, people do not borrow. If interest rate going up to 17%, what people are going to do? Well, they stop borrowing. It's like, well, 17, I don't want to borrow. I'm only going to borrow if I think I can get 25, but I can't find those investments where I can make 25, so I'm not going to borrow. And then interest will adjust in a way that, again, you always borrow at a rate that is below what you think you can invest and receive your investment. So over a long period of time, those averages do hold true. Sometimes during very good economic time, people expect 10 and make 15 on average. During bad economic time, they expect 10 and make 5 on average. On average, they make whatever it is they expect because they adjust those expectations over time. And therefore, stocks will always do better than bonds over a long period of time. They just have to. Think about it, it's not just that, it's in any kind of investment where you borrow something in order to get some return. If you invest half an hour into driving here to class, the time and the gas and all that, if you don't think you're going to get more than this time is worth it, you're just not going to come here to class. Okay? If you invest $30,000 in getting this degree, you would not do that unless you think that the benefit to your career over the next whatever years is going to be more than $30,000. Plus whatever, it's not just money, it's also, intellectual curiosity and things like that. Basically, the return altogether has to be higher than that. Now, it may not be true for every single one of you here, even though my experience will be that it's probably going to be true for the vast, vast, vast majority of you, but that's how it works, right? You don't invest something that you expect to get less in. So that is the difference. That would make the difference between bonds and stocks. Any questions or comments on that? No comments? You just agree with me? That was easy. Okay, so let's go forward with that.
Don't T-bills always have marketability because it's basically a vehicle for the government a lot of times to either stimulate or slow down the economy?
Yeah.
Purchasing or selling?
Yeah, but again, at an interest, but they can only use them if they're sell at an interest rate that makes sense for investors, right? People will not buy those things or will not sell them those things unless there is demand. Again, the government cannot borrow forever. Okay, so there's always this, okay, what do we get for our money? So it all gets into the same story that I'm telling you. But yes, they can use also as a vehicle to stimulate or stop the economy from overheating. Yeah?
If gold, I guess, isn't a good investment, and the return is so low, why do countries stock up on so much gold and think it's so important? And it's, I guess, like an indicator of how well a country's economy is doing, even the rest of commodities.
I don't know. There's a lot of things that do not make sense in this world, and some I cannot explain to you. There's a lot of things that people or countries do for no apparent reason. I mean, seriously, if you go to a war, having more gold will help you win the war. And people think about, what? But really, I'm holding gold because, and excuse me for talking about more because you asked. I'm holding gold because of if things get really bad. That's what it's like. Well, if things get really bad, what are you going to do with this gold? Are you going to just wear it all over? Nobody's going to buy it from you because people want food. They don't want gold, right? I'd rather have a can of tuna. It's going to do a lot better to me when things are really bad than an ounce of gold. Seriously, think about it. I mean, there's just no... So, I'm sorry, some things I can give you an answer, it's like, here's why they do that. And sometimes like, I don't know why they do that. But people there's a lot of psychology there, investment in general. People like things that are history, and they have all the times, they have the pretty gold eagle there and all that. It's like, I don't know. I don't know.
But do you think it's also, just to piggyback off of what Arturo said, do you think it's also just, cultural? Because there are definitely a lot of cultures that, even when people get married, they give a lot of gold, or that, the amount of gold that someone owns it equates to their, level of wealth.
It is, because it is worth money. Why it's worth that certain amount of money? There's some economics behind it, but the fact that it cannot... Okay, so gold is worth more than silver for different reasons. It's maybe prettier, it's more rare, but that is separate from the fact that it cannot continue to appreciate at a very fast pace. Just because something is very viable doesn't mean that it will continue to be even more viable. Here I'm talking about, not about the value. Okay, it has value because people are willing to pay $10,000 for a watch. Okay, but would you be willing to pay 10% more for the same watch forever and ever and ever when they make only 1% more in salary? That is the question. Okay, so yes, it has some value, and an ounce of gold is more valuable than a barrel of oil or a bushel of wheat, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to appreciate faster. So you cannot, you shouldn't distinguish, you shouldn't separate, or you should separate appreciation from actual value. It has value, maybe high, because people like it. You can't argue with that. Okay, people like gold, people like cashmere, certain things people are willing to pay more for, that's fine. It doesn't mean it's going to appreciate faster.
So you could say the same thing about diamonds.
Yes. Okay? They're rare, they have value, people like them, they would pay a lot of money for that, but it doesn't mean it's going to appreciate fast. Okay? Now, in terms of benchmark, let me give you some numbers about how much these things or these asset classes appreciate on average. So basically, historically, and that does not mean for the future, but at least it uses a benchmark. If you're talking about stocks, the return is usually, or historically in the last 100 years or so, was somewhere between 9 and 11% per year in nominal terms. The return on bonds was 5 to 6% in nominal terms. Bills or T-bills were somewhere between 3 and 4. And I'll talk about real estate a little bit later. I don't want to give it to you here because that will spoil what I am building toward. When I'm talking about those returns, that was in an environment of about 3.5–4% inflation, 3.5–4% inflation. So you can subtract from that about 3.5% in order to get the real return. So you can see basically if you subtract from T-bills 3.5%, basically return nothing. And we saw 100 to 150 over such long period of time, it's basically almost 0% return. If you're talking about stocks, let's say 10% minus 3.5, it's something like 6.5% in real terms. Those are the numbers, at least historically. Now, I don't know if those numbers will continue, but I do know that we have all the reasons to believe, and there's reason to believe that stocks will continue to outperform bonds by some significant margin, and bonds will outperform T-bills in this case, and T-bills are somewhere around the same return you should expect from commodities.
I don't think I understood your comparison from securities to bonds. A company needs to issue bonds before they issue stocks?
No, they don't have to, but every time they are engaged in investment, if they don't have the money, they borrow it. And if they borrow it, usually they use the bond market. And even if they don't borrow, that is a benchmark for what the industry is borrowing. So even if I don't borrow, other company is borrowing. The borrow return rate, they wouldn't do that unless they expect to get higher return. Okay? And you will learn about more details in Dr. Lin's class, but this is the basic idea. Now, the reason I'm giving you those numbers is for a few reasons. First of all, so you have some benchmark, so you get an idea of what other things returned. So if somebody tells you, oh, I have a 15% investment return for you, you kind of say, okay, that's comparable to stocks 1.5 times that. Or if somebody tells you, I have an 8% investment for you, you kind of know where it falls. It's good as a benchmark. It's also good because I want to talk about something that is called the 4% rule. Anybody heard about the 4% rule? Here's what the 4% rule is about. Basically, and this is related to question 9, by the way. Question 9 is how much money a person should have in order for you to consider that person to be wealthy. Let me show you how this 4% rule is related to that. When I'm asking you, and usually I used to ask this question in a much more blunt way, and I used to ask it as, do you want to be rich? And how much money you need to have in order to consider yourself rich? Some people get offended by that. I don't know why. I think that if there's a place where you can talk about money, it's in a business class. Okay? But in the United States, speaking about money is kind of taboo. People talk about everything else. They talk about their health. They talk about their sex life. They talk about like personal issues, friendship. Tell you all about. But if you ask them how much money do you make, oh my God, you just ask me how much money do I make? That is like, how dare you? Okay, people just don't like those questions for whatever reason. So I try not to get too personal there, even though if you think about it, like those are questions that we need to. Those are the kind of things that matter to people that sit in those classes. So when you come to a question like this, people have a problem answering that because people have a problem converting a lump sum into a cash flow. If you think about it, when you answer this question, people put numbers like, oh, you know, to be rich, it's $1 million, or it's 10 million, or it's 100 million, or, you know, some number, and you don't really think about what does it mean. So what does 10 million mean? What people are, it's easier for them to deal with is if some amount of cash would say, you know what, $300,000 for me would be wealthy or well off or whatever it is, or 200 or 500,000 or whatever it is your number. There's no right answer for that, of course, different lifestyle. But there's some number. It's much easier for us to think in terms of per year or per month, but it's much more difficult for us to think about a lump sum. So this 4% rule is the rule that will allow you to take this lump sum and convert it into a cash flow, or back the other way around. Here's what I need from cash flow, so here's the amount of number I need. And this 4% rule is basically based on, again, historical returns and what economists and finance experts are expecting for the near future, given current inflations. And basically say, you know what, if you can get in the current stock market something like 9%, and if you can get on bonds right now something like 4%, that's 4 and 9, add them together, it's 13. Divide by 2 to take the average, it's 6.5. If we have inflation of about 2.5%, you will get about 4% real rate of return. That is roughly the calculation. Now, some people say, no, it's not 4%, it's 4.5%, or it's 3.5%. That's fine, but it's somewhere, there's some agreement that about 4% of any amount you have, you'll be able to generate 4% real terms over a long period of time. Okay? So for example, if I have $1 million in net worth, I can take this $1 million and invest in, for example, those two asset classes, and I can get $40,000 of return in year one. I spend those $40,000 to support my lifestyle, and then the following year, I will get amount of money that will be $40,000 plus real rate, plus the rate of inflation. Because remember, I'm generating here 4% in real terms. So if I have $1 million, I can withdraw $40,000 this year, and the next year I can withdraw for my investment $40,000 plus the rate of inflation. Let's say inflation was 2%, so 2% of 40,000 is $800. So next year I can withdraw $40,800, live the same lifestyle. Next year inflation was another 3%, you add a 3% to that, you can withdraw this amount, and according to this 4% rule, you should be able to do it forever. Because basically every year your investment should be able to generate enough return to allow you and keep this 40,000 in real terms, so in the same purchasing power, forever and ever, or for a very long period of time. Nothing, you never say forever, but for a very long period of time. So basically what it means, if you think about what I just said, for every $1 million that you have, you can generate $40,000 of income. Now let's first talk about where does that $1 million come from in this example. We're talking about net worth. Talk about net worth, it means all the things that you own minus the things that you owe. So if you want to calculate one person net worth, you would take, how much the house is worth and how much the car is worth and how much the furniture and jewelry and, the china that they receive from their grandma and the twin beds for the kids and whatever it is, all that together is worth, let's say, $1.5 million. And then you subtract from that, well, they have a loan on the house and they have some credit card debt and they have a loan on the car and all the loans together, let's say, are $400,000, $1.5 million minus $400,000, they have $1.1 million in net worth. That means that if they sell everything they have and pay all the debt, they're going to have $1.1 million, and then they can generate income from that. Now, of course, people don't do that because they want to keep those things, but that is the theory behind it. And if you think about it, in order to generate significant amount of money, $1 million doesn't even come close. Okay? You can say whatever you want about what is being wealthy or rich, or $40,000 a year, it's not going to give you a fancy lifestyle here in Miami, Florida. Okay? You may be able to survive here, and that's fine. I survived in $12,000 when I lived in Lawrence, Kansas as a student. But, if you really think about being wealthy, $40,000 will not cut it. Okay? So you can take whatever numbers you have in your mind. Let's say, okay, so I think that 300,000, let's say 400,000 is the number. Well, 400,000 divided by 4%, that will give you $10 million. That is your number. Or if 200,000 a year is your number, take 200,000 divided by 4%, $5 million. That is your number. Whatever is your number, everybody have a different number, but at least now you have some idea of how to get to that number. The reason this is so important is because if you think about people invest because they want to be wealthy, or they save to retirement, except that they're starting here, and they want to get to retirement, except they don't know where retirement is. How can you get from A to B if you don't know what B is? Okay, so I want to save enough money for retirement, but I don't know how much money is that. Is it 5 million? Is it 10 million I need to save? Do I need to save 3 million, 20 million? I don't know. Okay, so if you don't know where you're going to get, you're just not going to get there. The way people do that in retirement is that they get to their first job and they fill in this paper that says, how much do you want to contribute to retirement? And you kind of ask, what do you contribute? 5%? What do you contribute? 7? I think I'm going to do 6. Okay? They just like, we're going to contribute 6% or 10% or some number that they don't really take from anywhere. And then they put this money away every month, hopefully. And then they hope that's going to be enough at some point to retire on. Rather than say, okay, where do we need to get? Here's my number. And then backing into what a reasonable return I can get, and then trying to get there. It's a much better strategy, right? You don't just start walking and hope you're going to get somewhere. You first find out where you're going to get, and then you walk toward that. That's the way we do everything else, except the important things like investment for retirement. So that's why I think this 4% rule is extremely important. Now I'll show you after this question here from Sebastian.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you. You're assuming that everything stays even keel and you have the same rate of return every single year. What happens if there's an economic collapse?
Yes, so again, the idea here is that those returns are on average. Usually the expected return is slightly more than 4% that leave some for volatility. But yeah, you have some years that you do a lot better than 4%, but you still take only 4%. Then some years that you do less than 10%, you cannot take from the extras you generated years before that. So on average, this holds.
Yeah, like if we have something happened like it did in 2008, where the economy crashed completely.
Yeah, so if you have people that just got into retirement or thinking about retiring in 2008-9, those people probably postponed their retirement. I mean, I know people like that. That's like, well, I'm going to retire this year. Well, maybe next year, or maybe I'll stay 2 or 3 more years. Because it's, where you start is important. But the idea is that on average, you should be able to generate something in a magnitude of 4% in real terms. And you can argue that it's 3.5, and I can argue that it's 4.5, but it's somewhere in this number. It's not 12. It's not 1. It's somewhere in the magnitude of 4. This is not exact. Again, that's why it's called a rule. Something that is, in general, true, and there's a reason for that based on returns we saw historically. Now, we talk about people that are, don't want to talk about money, but I do want to show you what happened when people don't talk about money. I have here also for you on Blackboard, I have wealth tables. Wealth tables will be basically the net worth of people here in the United States. The United States, the richest or one of the richest countries in the world. Okay? Again, we're talking about net worth. We're talking about the idea of selling everything you have, including the things that you'll never sell, like your wedding ring, etc., or your grandma china, or things that may be worth, your grandma china may be worth 1,000, but then try to sell it, you're not going to get 1,000. You know how those things work. The median net worth for people in the United States is $66,000. Now this is 2010, today is slightly higher. They don't produce it for every year in this detail, so it's a little bit old, but it's not that much different. $66,000, that is the median net worth. So just to give you an idea, this is the richest person in the United States, and this is the poorest person in the United States. This is the median. This is the person here in the middle. This person right there is worth $66,000. Try to apply the 4% rule to that. What are you going to get? 4% on 60 is 600, about $2,500. Can anybody here live on $2,500 a year? No, you cannot. Now, it's true that when you look at the median, this number is deceiving, because then you say, well, some of the people in here in the median, those are people that are very young. Okay, if you're 20 years old, or 22 years old, you didn't have time to accumulate wealth. That's why you don't have money, not because you never will, it's because you just didn't have time. And besides that, you're not retiring right now, so you don't need to have net worth. You're going to be living off your salary. So really what we want to look at is people that actually had time to accumulate money. And if you look at that, let's look at some other tables.
When you're self-made, it takes time.
Tell me about it. I think, one second. Something else I want to show you here. Oh, by the way, yeah, that's what I want to show you. By the way, if you do have a graduate degree, your median net worth is not 66, it's about 250. So kids, stay in school, okay? You do better than if you don't. You say kids, and many of you are older than me here, but okay. Let me show you this number, which is more relevant. So here we're talking not about the median, we're talking about people that are already older, so they're 65 years or older. And if you look at this line right here, the people that have at least $500,000, there's basically only about 20 or 22% of population, 22% of population that are that age that should be retiring or close to retirement. I don't know that 65 is the retirement age, but somewhere around that. People that should be at the age that be close to retirement, only about 22% of them has a net worth that is higher than $500,000. So if you think about it, again, drawing that, put it somewhere here, this number is $500,000. So only people here, only the top 20% or 22% in the US have $500,000 or more at the time they need to retire. And by the way, if you go even, and that number is even more sad, if you go here around 90%, so this is the 90th percentile, this number here is about 700,000.
Wow.
That's it. Now the top 10%, then it explodes. But basically people here, 90% of the people that live in the United States at the age of retirement have $700,000 roughly, $700,000 or less to their name. Multiplied by 4%, you get $28,000 a year. That's it. And we're talking here about the 90% of people that are wealthy here in the United States, supposedly, only have about $28,000 a year to live off when they're retirement. And yet, yes, they're going to depend on things like Social Security, etc., but guys, do not count on Social Security. And if you want to call yourself well off or wealthy or live a good lifestyle, depending on Social Security, is probably not your best bet. Now, the reason I'm showing you those, it's not in order to depress you. It's basically to tell you that most people choose not to have enough wealth. And when I say choose not to have wealth, it's because all the opportunities were here. In order to grow wealth, and I'll show you the numbers, in order to grow wealth, the percentage of returns, just from the graphs I show you, and I can show you some calculation in a minute, it was all there. People that wanted to accumulate a significant amount of wealth over time could do that because the returns were here, etc., except they chose not to do it. When I'm saying chose not to do it, maybe it's a little bit harsh, but the idea is that when people, first of all, don't know where they're going, right? Think about it, don't know where they're going because I don't know how what I'm saving, just put 6 or 8 or whatever percent, they just don't, or at this point. But people always think about why shouldn't I save for retirement right now? And the story goes something like this, because you're in college and you want to save for retirement, and it's like, well, you know, maybe now it's not the time because I'm in college, but when I'm finishing college, that's when I'm going to start saving for retirement. And then, of course, you finish college, and, you know, maybe now it's not a good time to save for retirement because I just want to, you know, move from my college apartment, get a slightly nicer apartment, maybe replace my old car, and then I'm going to start saving for retirement. And then you met your wonderful future husband or wife, and you fell in love, and you just want to do the wedding, and then you're going to save for retirement, except that you also need a honeymoon, because honeymoon is important, of course. But then you're really going to start saving for retirement, except that you also want to upgrade your apartment to a house where family should live, and then the first son, daughter come, and I don't know much about kids because I don't have any yet. I don't. Anyway, I don't know much about kids, but I heard that they eat and drink and they need diapers and they need to be going to school and also they're expensive. So kids are expensive. You just have the first one. You're going to take care of the kid because they're the center of your world, but then you're going to start saving for retirement, except that 2 years later, the second kid's coming, so you need to upgrade the house because the kids are uncomfortable. They need each their own house, and then their own room. So, you know, make sure that they're comfortable, but then you're going to start saving for retirement, except that at that point, they're ready to go to school, and your education is just the most important things out there, and it's very important to send them to the best school out there, right? So you're going to do that, and it's expensive, so you can't save retirement right now, but then, I'm trying to make it a little bit humorous, but that's really the reality. The idea is that there's always a reason why you wouldn't save for retirement, hence, people don't. And if you live in a country like the United States, which is a capitalist country, which basically say, you go save for retirement yourself, and if not, too bad, then you cannot just let it meet you at some age 55 to save for retirement because it's not going to work. Let me show you what the numbers look like. Let's say that this is my age. Let's say that I just graduated from college at the age of 21 years old. And I choose to contribute, and I'll put it here. Contribution is $5,000. I can choose to contribute each year $5,000 to my Roth IRA account. Now, Roth IRA account, for those who don't know, basically you can contribute to that, and any amount that is being accumulated there is tax-free, and then when you take the money out, you do not pay tax on that, never. So basically, from the minute you put it into the Roth IRA, you will never pay tax on that. It is tax-free accumulating and when you withdraw it. And let's say that your rate of return is 9%. And just for simplicity, you contribute $5,000 each year. Now, of course, that as things move forward and the dollar become weaker, you're probably going to contribute a little bit more each year because $5,000 become very little. But $5,000, we're not talking about an amount that even somebody making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, they can put $5,000 aside. It's not that huge amount of money. If we're taking this age 21, and we're taking, let's put it +1, and then I'm going to Control C. I'm just going to drag it all the way. Let's say I'm dragging it all the way to age 67. Okay? Which we'll call it a reasonable retirement age. Contribution in the first year is simply $5,000. Okay? My wealth will be simply $5,000. Then, in the following year, if I am still contributing $5,000, and I'm going to anchor it, and I will do Control C and just drag it down. My wealth each year will grow by $5,000 plus the rate of return. So think about that. In the year after that, it will be this $5,000 that I had before, plus 1 plus, sorry.
Can you zoom in, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you zoom in?
Yes, I will after I enter that. So times 1 plus the rate of return times 1 plus the rate of return, which is 9%. I'm going to anchor that as well. I'm going to close the parentheses. So that's the rate of return I'm getting on the wealth I had. And then I'm adding to that another $5,000, or I guess I can point to this. I'm adding to that this extra $5,000. So after the second year, I'm going to have $10,450. So the 5,000, the 5,000, 9% on the original investment. Now let me zoom in. And then I do this every year. So I can take this, Control C, and I can drag it down. Now we know that historically the return is actually more than 9%. There's something like 11, 11.5, 12%. It's actually didn't happen. even when adjusted to inflation, it's not much less than 9%. We take this, we put it in dollars amount and get rid of decimals. Basically, by the time you're 67 years old, you'd have $3 million to your name. If your spouse did the same thing, you'd have $6 million to your name, which is a number that is very different than 700,000. And I'm not talking about somebody who put hundreds of thousands of dollars into retirement every year. I'm talking about $400 a month, roughly. Right? It come up to a very, very large number. Except most people don't do that. Because when I teach corporate finance or investment, and I always start with a lecture like this, and I tell people that are 20 years old, you should save for retirement, they're falling asleep. Because when 20 years old, the last thing you want to hear about is saving for retirement. There's other things more exciting than, like, the girl sitting next to you is a lot more exciting than save for retirement. So you just, like, whatever. So if they don't do that, and if they say, for example, say, you know what, instead of accumulating $3.1 million, if I start age 21, I'm just going to wait a few years. And I'm not going to be procrastinating like the rest of America and start saving at age 55. I'm going to start at age 30. 30 is pretty young, right?
39.
Yep.
31?
39.
Let's say, I don't want to really tell you something sad here. You know you haven't decided. Let's say that you start at age 30. That will be your 5,000 right here. That will be the first 5,000. I'm going to erase those. Now, how much money did you save? You think about it. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 times 5,000. Now I know time, value of money, etc. Just to make it simple. You basically, you did not put in retirement $45,000 because in those years you spend more on other things, whatever it is. How much do you think this $45,000 cost you? Well, it cost you about $2 million. Or $1.7 million. Basically, instead of having 3.1 million, I'm sorry?
That's all you have. It's not much. It's nothing.
Okay, basically giving up $45,000 basically cost you $1.7 million at the end of the day. And that is if I postpone until age 30. If I'm starting at age 39, you basically, if you're 39 and you don't have money in retirement, it's time to get to work. Let me just say that.
The percentage
Okay?
always going to be 9%. Is right now it's 9%.
I'm just saying, this is the assumption here. Let's say 9%. Historically, that happened. And the reason I'm talking about something that did happen is because I'm telling you that people in the past, at least, they had the choice because those returns were here. Those contributions allowed by the government in terms of tax-free. By the way, those are tax-free. $3 million. And again, talk about, and that is really, that is very achievable to mid-class families that can put $400 aside every month and invest in something that has some risk in it, and it accumulates to very large numbers. I have a lot of questions here, so we'll start with Pedro.
Mine is simple. It's just if you could click on the on 10,450 to see the formula. That's it.
Here you go. I'm late.
Does the rate fluctuate at all?
In this case, it doesn't. I'm assuming an average of 9%. In reality, in the last 100 years, of course, it fluctuated, so it was sometimes above, sometimes below. It averaged, historically, if you look at the last period to look at it, the return was about 11.5% on average.
In an IRA?
In IRA, you can invest if you invest in stocks. And by the way, when I'm talking about this 9%, it's not about, oh, I need to be this genius investor to only pick the best investment. That's not. I'm talking about buying the average stock market, basically buying a basket, like an S&P 500 or any investment like that. By the way, I can talk to you about investments all you want in more details after class, in my office, over the phone, over coffee. I'll be happy to do it. We just don't have time to do that here. If you want, for example, help with starting those kind of things or whatever, it's not my job, but I'm happy to help people because I know it is needed. I still have a PhD in finance. I can probably help you get started. I'm not sure who was first, so we'll go there.
Ladies first.
Are we assuming that this is a Roth IRA or a traditional?
It can be whatever. I'm just giving numbers, but according to the current U.S. tax rules, if you don't make too much money, you can invest in a Roth IRA. So I can't invest in Roth IRA anymore. But I think that if you make less than 180,000 a year, or even
131, I think.
and then it starts phasing. But if you married and all that, I think it's anyway somewhere in the 100s. After that, you can't do that. But then you can probably invest more. So some of that will be taxed. Oh, and I think 180s or so. That's for the traditional.
Yeah.
Traditional. So yeah, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't invest in those anymore because I can't. But for most people, so that's why I don't know the numbers. Most people, you can invest in those if you make $180,000 a year. You can still invest in those and basically get tax free. If you can't do that, you can have 401k that will give you some advantages. There's no limitation for income, except you can't do the Roth. So again, the details of the taxes and all that, that's aside. It's important, but aside. I'm just trying to show you the big picture here. Yes?
The number here, you cannot adjust by the inflation, today.
Yes, you can adjust for inflation. Again, we said that historically, this number was actually higher. So even if we adjust for inflation, it's not much lower. So on one hand, yes, it should be lower in terms of return. On the other hand, if you do want to adjust for inflation, you also need to consider the fact that you probably contribute more than $5,000 over time, right? As money worth less, the increasing the amount you contribute to Roth IRA and your salary going higher, so it's become easier for you to contribute $6,000 or $7,000, $8,000. So we kept it very simple. I'm trying to have things like, let's put a spreadsheet in 2 minutes just to put a point across, knowing that it has some issues. But the point I want to get across is the fact that money was allowed from the tax perspective and from the return perspective to be accumulated in large magnitudes, except people chose not to because they were not aware of that. They didn't know much about investment. They think that the stock market, for example, is the casino, things like that. And they just like, well, I don't want to deal with that. And basically the end is pretty sad. I mean, you think about people now retiring with no money, that is a problem, not just for them, it's a problem for everybody around them.
So 9 years, waiting 9 years across the time.
Basically, yes. So do not wait more if you already have. Yes, Daniel.
Why are you adding back the 5,000? I'm kind of having like a mind blockage right now.
Why do I add 5,000? So in each particular year, I'm saying, this is my wealth before.
Additional.
I'm adding 9%, and then I'm adding another 5,000 the following year.
Professor, how do we compare to other countries, industrialized countries, in terms of savings and retirement savings?
In the United States, it was, well, it depends. If you think about, guys, we have a question here about how we compare, to other industrial countries. So you have other countries, and maybe Francesca can talk about that for just 1 second. Have other countries would have bigger social nets, like Germany or France, for example, where you don't need to depend on the government as much, and therefore, you don't need to depend on your own saving as much because the government provides more, healthcare, retirement plan, all that. And assuming that the saving rate there is similar and even lower than it is in the U.S. from numbers that I saw, is that correct? Or you do not know? It is slightly lower than it is in the U.S., but for good reasons, because people can depend on the government. Then you have other countries like Japan, for example, where the saving rate is a lot higher. It's cultural. And then you have basically third world countries, people do not save at all because they can't. They just can't. Okay? But here, in the way that the system is set up, because you have to depend on yourself.
But we are not where we should be.
We should not. We are not
far from
that. And a big part of that was because companies used to provide pensions. They don't do that anymore. It is very rare that you're going to go to a job today and first of all stay with the same company for 30 years, and the company say, you know what, when you retire, we're going to give you salary for the rest of your life, and here's your salary. That's not how it works anymore, because they got in trouble when they promised that. They got bankrupt. They promised to buy. We know what happened with all the unionized companies that have unions that basically forced them to promise too much. Everybody lost. The union lost. The companies lost. Everybody went bankrupt. Yes.
So that 9% is considering investments in stocks and bonds? Whatever.
No, in this case, will be equities. But again, forget about the 9%.
Right.
Really, the idea here is about the fact that wealth could be created. The fact that if you wait And here's the three things I want you to take from that. If you want to save for retirement, whatever it is long-term goal you need to have, you need to do three things. Number one is that you have to start investing now, because every day you wait is extremely costly. That's one point. Whether you use 9% or you use 7% or you use 11%, the numbers of course will be different, but the point is the same. So one is that you have to start now. The second one is that you must take some risk. Most people are just either uninformed or unwilling to take risk for whatever reason, and they think that if they play it safe, they will end up winners because they play safe. Except that if you think about the safe route for something, for today's environment, the safe route will give you basically 1% return, investing in CDs or things like that. You would never accumulate any. So this is a 1.4%. You would never accumulate any money at a rate of 1%. You just basically, you go safe, but you basically guarantee that you would never have any money. This is, people don't understand that they're safe, they are guaranteeing something that they don't want. Except they feel in their mind that they're safe because tomorrow they know how much money they're going to have. But they also know that in 30 years they will not have what they need. If you really go safe, unless you can put $200,000 aside every year, or you have some crazy salary, you can put a lot of money aside every year, you have just no chance. So you have to start today, you have to take risk, and then the third thing would be you cannot take too much risk. And I'm talking about not taking too much risk. This is too early to talk about that because we haven't learned about how to measure risk. We'll talk about that later. Guys, we haven't talked about how to measure risk, and we'll talk about it later. But the idea here is that a lot of those returns are addictive. So people that try to see, okay, so if I earn 9% return, this is what I'm going to get. Whatever number was there. And if I'm going to earn, let's take it back for a second. Okay, all the way here. Okay, so for 9% we said 3.1. And hey, if I'm going to take this other investment that is slightly riskier with 12%, the number is a lot higher. And if I'm putting here 15%, the number is a lot higher, and so on and so forth. And people get addicted to those things that get higher returns, except things that return abnormally high returns. Like somebody tell you that they're going to have investment for you that consistently earn 15%, you should raise your eyebrows and ask how. Most of those investments are highly leveraged. And the idea is that if those investments are high leverage, and I'll show you when we talk about leverage, you have these very high returns for a while, these things are successful, and then when things go bad, it's not like you lose 30% or 40%, or you lose 100% of your money, in many cases. We saw it here in Miami just a few years ago, right? People were leveraged, people with tens of millions of dollars, and in some cases go bankrupt, have no money, 100%, and then guess what? When you lose 100%, it doesn't matter what happened the next year, even if the market correct and go back to whatever, it doesn't matter. Because you get whatever return on nothing, which is nothing. So the idea here is that if you're going to make 15%, but then at some point it's like you lose everything, it doesn't matter what's going to happen later. And two things are going to happen. First of all, you're going to lose everything. And then second, you're never going to touch risky things after that because you already got burned. So you lose everything and then you go into safe things. You die. So we're going to learn about how to measure risk and what too much risk means. But remember that. Start saving today. Do yourself a favor. Take risk because without risk you will not get to big numbers. And don't take too much risk because there's too many deals out there that are too good to be true. They usually are too good to be true. Yes, Ross?
From an investment strategy standpoint, does that old school rule of 100 hold any water anymore?
I'm sorry, the rule of what?
The 100 where your age is what you should invest in bonds. The difference between it and 100 and the remainder should be in stocks.
I know this rule. Here's the thing. Today in the environment, and I want to leave with that. Today in the environment where long-term bonds are where they're at, which are basically at all-time low, investing large amount of your wealth in bonds does not make sense. Now, a lot of people make a lot of money in bonds investing in the 1970s and 80s because rates went down, and as you learned in Dr. Lin's class, as rates go down, bond prices go up. So you can get very high return. Actually, in the last 30 years, return on bonds was almost as high as stocks because rates went from 17% to 3%, and for every percent they went down, the values didn't go up in a very significant way. Once they're at 3 or 2, they can go to negative 15. They stay at 2 or 3, if you're lucky, and then you get 2-3% minus inflation, which is basically 0. Or they go up, which is probably what's going to happen. If rates go up, you lose money for every time rates go up. So you're not even going to get your 2 or 3%, because every time rates go up, the value of the bond go down. You should get basically 0% rate of return long term from now. I don't see how you can get much more than 0% in bonds the next 30 years. Definitely not in real terms. So I don't think this rule holds anymore.
You invest in real estate.
Real estate is one. We'll talk about that. You remember, I'm trying to be very careful here, not talk about real estate yet. Which is the average bank? I'm not sure what Jose is asking. What is the average rate at the EU? Basically, if you ask about the EU and the bank rates there, they're even lower than here.
USA in Spanish.
Oh, okay. Banks now in the US, if you put your money in a city in the US, you get nothing. You get nothing. I mean, when I say nothing, they advertise when they give you 1%, and even when they give you 1%, it's basically they're advertising, they're willing to give you more than the market just so you go there, you become a client, and they make money a few other ways. The real rates are something like 0.5% or point. I have money sitting in the bank. Every time I go and I deposit a check or I take some money, the cashier's like, oh, you have money in our account. You have quite a lot of money there. Why don't you put it in our CD? It's like, we can get you to. I was like, no, I don't want to do CDs. I have plans for the money, just waiting for the thing, etc. But basically, it's like, yes, the rates right now, I'd rather have it with 0% and have accessibility than having 0.1% and have it tied for whatever. So rates are basically 0. Yes, that is, I guess, the same question. So right now, the returns are basically 0. But you do have investment opportunities in other asset classes. So giving your money to the bank right now, there's a difference also between saving and investing. If you're talking about saving, okay, I put the money in the bank because I need it next year, I need it 2 years from now, and I want to make sure that I have it in a year or two. That's saving, that's fine. You put it in the bank, you get nothing, but at least you know 2 years from now you have it. If you put in the stock market, maybe 20% higher, 30% higher, 30% lower, it's going to fluctuate. So if you need the money in 2 years, you should not put it in the stock market. You should not be investing in real estate. Fluctuation there are way too high. If you're looking long term, then you should not be putting in the bank. We'll talk about it later in more detail, but other investment opportunities make a lot more sense. Okay. This is a little bit about other investments. Do you want to know how to solve, since we're talking about accumulating wealth, you want to know how to solve question, because we already talked about question 9. You want to know how to solve question 4? I think question 4 is kind of fun. And the reason I'm thinking that question 4 is fun is because I truly believe that people, when they deal with numbers, when they do business, it's important not to be just dependent on the Excel spreadsheet all the time or on your calculator. Sometimes it's good to be able to think and do things in your head and think that, oh yeah, that number makes sense or that number doesn't make sense without just typing everything into your Excel. So that's why for number 4, I asked you to do it without a calculator. Anybody know how to do it without a calculator? Unless you took my class before, then you are not for a game. Anybody know how to take $100,000, accumulate at 12% for 36 years, and approximate how much it's going to be worth without a calculator? Yes, Daniel, you took my class. Rule of 72.
Yeah, my bad.
Let me tell you something about the rule of 72. Talk about a lot of rules today. Rule of 4%, we talked about that. Here's what the rule of 72 means. The rule of 72 is basically telling us that any amount of money or any number but in this case, talk about numbers in dollars. Any amount of money will double every 72 divided by the interest rate that you earn on that investment.
Every 72?
Every 72 divided by the rate of return that you will earn on that investment. So for example, if you earn 8% return, take 72 divided by 8, that is 9, your money is going to double every 9 years. If you earn 6% return, you take 72 divided by 6, your money is going to double every 12 years. If you earn 12% return, 72 divided by 12 is 6, your money is going to double every 6 years approximately. Okay? 72 divided by the rate of return. That will give you the number of years it will take your money to double. Okay? Now I need to do two things here in order to move forward to that. First of all, I want to convince you that I'm not just making it up. Right? Oh, that sounds cool, but how did you come up with that? Okay, we need to check that it works, right? And then I'll show you how it actually works with this problem. So, how can we check that what I just told you is true? I'm sorry? You can Google it because the internet knows everything, and the internet never lies. So if the internet says it's true, isn't that the commercial? But the internet never lies. About the girl that's meeting the French model and. Thank you. Anyway, we have this equation that says future value equal present value times 1 plus r to the power of n. Now, if we take some amount of money, let's call it $1, and we're taking some rate of return, let's call it 8%. You can try a different number, but let's take 8%. And I told you now that according to the rule of 72, if you earn 8%, 72 divided by 8 is 9. It will take you 9 years to double. So what we can do, we can put 9 right here and see whether this amount will give us about $2. Because we started with $1, we get 8% for 9 years, we should get $2. If we do, it works. So let's see what we get. Do it here on the side. We can get 1.08 to the power of 9. 1999. Basically 2. Okay, again, it's not exact. It's an approximation, but pretty good approximation. We can test it one more time. We can test it, for example, okay, if we take $1, and let's say we invest it at 6% return. And I just told you 6% return, 72 divided by 6, it's 12. And if this number right here is worth 2, then it means the rule of 72 works. So, again, we go back here, put here 1.06, put here to the power of 12, 2.01, pretty close. Okay, the rule of 72 would work pretty well anywhere from 4% to 15%. Once you move away from those numbers, it becomes less and less and less accurate. But if you think about investments, most investments earn within 4 to 15%. There aren't many investments that you're really interested to return 2 to 3%, and there aren't too many investments that earn you 20% return. So actually it becomes pretty convenient. You can use the rule of 72. Just try 2 numbers, try 5 more at home. It works. It will give you pretty good approximation. That's the way to test it. So how do we solve question 4? The way you solve question 4 is say, okay, I have $100,000, right? And I'm earning 12% return, which means I'm going to double my money every 6 years. So this is year 0. This is year 6. This is year 12. This is year 18, 24, 30, and 36. Each time at each one of those points, my money is going to double. So my 100,000 will become 200,000, will become 400,000, it will become 800,000, 1.6 million, 3.2 million, 6.4 million. That is the approximate answer for that. Okay? Again, I don't know if it's necessary to know those things, but those are the kind of things that will help you hopefully think on your feet, and I believe this is important. Any questions about what we talked about? If I can add just one more thing about this saving for retirement, because we don't have much more time today, is the fact that if you think about it, one more thing about it, when people start saving when they're young over time, continue to save is basically a matter of habit. When people do not save when they're young and then start saving at age 50, it becomes very, very difficult. Because to take your salary back and start with something new, all of a sudden I'm going to save 20%. Basically, you take 20% out of your lifestyle, and especially when it's a choice, you don't have to do it today. You can always procrastinate more. It's very hard to do. So, again, starting young, it's better, believe me. You guys want to look at returns on real estate today?
Yes.
Yeah. Why? So let me just show you this number because we're 9:30 and we're not going to go for much longer. I want to show you some numbers on real estate. I'm not going to explain why. I'm just going to show you some numbers, and then we're going to talk about why they are like that. Because I need you to come back, right? I need to hook you somewhere like a drug dealer. I give you a little bit and you come back. So I'm just going to give you something, and we're not going to tell you why, but I'm just going to show you what the returns are. So here is performance, real estate, and trend. If I'm opening that slide right here, you can look at the first one for now. And here's what it tells you. U.S. home price index, that is in real terms, that's already adjusted for inflation in the U.S., all the way from 1890 until 2015. Again, we don't have 2016 because it's not over yet, but all the way to 2015, basically we have 126 years here, when you include the actual years, 126 years here. If you bought real estate, the average house in the U.S., in the average location, etc., and you paid $100 for that house, and then you waited 125 years, this house today, the average house in the U.S., is worth 160. So 100 to 160, that's 60% over 125 years. What is the return per year? Now this is in real terms, so it's actually when you account for the value of money over time, you account for the credit card. What is 60% over, and it's not even 60, it's like 58. And by the way, most of it come in the last 20 years, but let's call it 60%. 60% over 126 years, what is the return per year?
0.5, give or take, right?
How do you do that?
You just divide it.
Okay, so that's what I was waiting for. Remember, I was telling you what not to do? Yes. You can't just divide.
Compound.
Because of the compounding effect. So, but you're right, on those small numbers, actually going to be a pretty good estimation. Let's try to solve for that, because I want to remind you how to do it. Remember, we have, again, it's all the same equation. It's this future value, present value. So if we start from future value equal present value times 1 plus r to the power of n, okay, we divide both sides by PV. We take both sides to the power of 1 over n and subtract 1. We're going to get r. Right? We did it before. Future value divided by present value to the power of 1 over n minus 1 equal r. So if my future value is 160, that is the value at the end. If my present value is 100, that's my value in the beginning. So 160 divided by 100 is 1.6. If I'm taking the power of 1 over n, which is 126, that is the number of years we have here, so 1 over 126, and subtract 1, I'm going to get the rate of return. In this case, it's not the rate of return, it's the rate of appreciation. We'll talk about the difference later, but let's calculate for a minute. If we have 1.6 to the power of 1 over 126, subtract 1, and we can put it in percentages. This is the rate of appreciation of an average house in the United States over the last 125 years, about 1/3% a year. 1/3% a year. Now think about it, and again, remember, I'm trying to bring you back here next year, so I'm only revealing half the picture. But think about it, 1/3% a year, and house is like a horse. Okay, you need to feed it. And when I say you have to feed it, it's not like an ounce of gold that you just leave in the safe. You have to pay insurance,
Pay taxes.
And maintain at the very least. If you're talking about maintenance, somewhere in the magnitude of about 1% on average, cost of maintenance of an average house, you would take, just to have rough numbers, 1%. Property taxes, depends on where you're at. Here in Florida will be about 2%, Texas maybe will be almost 3%, some other place will be 1%. On average, let's call it 1.5%, that's true for the United States. You're already at 2.5%. And insurance, again, depends where you're at, on the ocean, away from the ocean, earthquakes, no earthquake. Roughly 0.5% of the value of the property, that's the average for the US. 1.5, and half, roughly 3% just to hold it. And then it's appreciated at 0.3% on average each year. That means that you're going to have basically a negative appreciation once you consider the cost of holding of about 2.5% every year on average in the last 125 years. By the way, those were wonderful 125 years for the United States. Right? I mean, it's not like, but the U.S. was the last 125 years. I mean, this is the time where you become from nothing to become whatever we are today. Those are great economic years in terms of course, hiccups and World War. Things happened. It wasn't smooth, I'm not pretending, but those were good 125 years. You have 0.3%. Before you're saying, but this is the average house in the U.S., what about, we're not average, right? We live in Miami, Florida. Well, I can show you numbers about Miami, Florida later, but just to show you something more comprehensive and maybe talk more about commercial, I'll show you this one. Okay, this article I give you. This particular article, which is, I don't know how many, 27 pages long. We're not going to read 27 pages. I'm going to, first of all, this is basically talk about 100 years in real estate prices in Manhattan. It actually talk about commercial real estate, offices specifically, in Manhattan, New York. Now, if you tell me that Manhattan, New York, over the last 100 years is the average place in the U.S., I don't know what you're smoking. It's not the average place. Manhattan, New York is not the average place in the U.S. 100 years, those three researchers from MIT basically have the following conclusion. Our conclusions are two. Okay, you can read 27 pages or you can read these two sentences here. Or one sentence. We don't want to read two sentences. That's one that's important. Adjusting for inflation, so in real terms, commercial office property values are 30% lower in 1999 than they were in 1899. Okay, so Manhattan, New York, offices, 100 years. 30% lower over 100 years. Try to calculate the average. Again, we can cheat and use the division. It's basically negative 0.25% a year. Call it zero. Basically, they did not appreciate in value in real terms. Yes, of course, they're selling for more dollars, but those dollars are not worth more because it basically just kept with inflation over 100 years in Manhattan, New York. No value creation. So why are we all here? Go do something else, right?
Change mayors?
So this is how I hook you up for the next time, because I want to talk next time about A, so this is important. So I want to talk about first why this happened, right? Because believe me, I can look through these. I haven't looked, but I know have you put 8? I asked those questions for too long. I know exactly what you wrote here. Okay, I know what you wrote here. You put 5%, you put 8%, you put 3%, you put 10%. Those are numbers you put there. Probably on average, you probably put about 6% return there. In real terms, where in reality, the price appreciation is more like 0. So I want to spend quite a lot of time explaining why it was 0 and why it should continue to be about 0 in the foreseeable future. I know that doesn't seem like this is why I want to come to class, but I think that if you understand at least that's at the base, and then we're going to add other things of, even though this is the reality, and even though that's what you expect, you should still invest in real estate, because there's a different side to the story. So hopefully we'll put this all together, so next time will be a much more real estate centric lecture, but I just had to build to that. I know you have a question.
So our homework are the quizzes?
Guys, your homework, you don't have homework, but you do need to start on the quizzes. So please use this time to start with quizzes. I'll see you next Wednesday. Have a good rest of the week.